Welcome to GluckRadio. I am Dr. Errol Gluck, executive life coach and master problem solver. Joe Muto. You might not know his name, but you might have heard what he did. Joe was a liberal who wound up working for Fox for 8 years as a producer. And after he had enough of that, he decided to go out with a bang. Joe met with some people at a blog named Gawker, and he became a mole for Fox News. Joe's life quickly became a tale of espionage, as he secretly sent pictures and stories of the famous news anchors behind the scenes. Today, Joe will talk about what it meant to be an atheist progressive working for the conservative media titan Bill O'Reilly. Joe will also tell us what Fox is like behind the scenes. Are they really trying to be fair and balanced, quote unquote? What made Bill O'Reilly say he should have been gay? We are going to hear it all. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Joe, welcome. Joe, thanks for coming. Okay, you look like a really happy guy.
Hey, I got a lot going on right now that I'm pretty happy about.
Good, yeah. It's nice in the morning to see somebody really happy. So the first question that I have for you is, how does a guy who's liberal get on a program like Fox? Did they screen you, or what's the story?
Obviously not well enough. They didn't.
What was the screening process? Did they actually screen people out to see if they're liberal or conservative?
They do at a certain point, not initially when they just hire you, off the street and you go through HR. There's no, ideological screening. But after you've been there a while, they do sort of pull you in and question you and ask if you, agree with the network's mission. It's a lot of coded language because I think it's probably
illegal,
right? Yeah.
Illegal, right? Absolutely. So they don't want you to rise through the ranks unless there's an affinity towards the philosophy.
Right.
Now, is this, by the way, what Fox does, or is this what all the different shows do, whether it's NPR or CNN or NBC? Is this unique to Fox?
I think it is unique to Fox. I haven't heard of a litmus test at any of these other organizations. And, the other organizations do have their slants. I think a lot of people would argue that NPR is liberal.
Oh, really? I never knew that.
MSNBC, of course, is leaning to the left. But there was an institutional paranoia at Fox. There was sort of a feeling that if you revealed your true beliefs, that they would it would hurt your career eventually. There was that belief, and there was anecdotal evidence of that happening.
So when did the news stop just being the news and being told objectively? What is the story with all this left and right? Why isn't a fact just a fact?
I think Fox was the one who spearheaded it. CNN was there, and CNN got started, and they got a 20-year head start on everybody else. And in the mid-'90s, MSNBC and Fox News popped up, and Fox gave the rightward slant on it. That was what they were conceived for.
Well, CNN is a little slanted to the left.
That's what people say, though. I never see it.
That's because you're slanted to the left.
Yeah, probably. I tend to think of CNN as just slanted towards boring. That was always my perception of them, was that they were trying so hard to be down the middle that it was just boring. It was and maybe that's working at Fox as long as I did. I did get sort of a bias towards wanting a slant with my news because it is more interesting for someone to give commentary along with the news. Say here's the top story today, and here's why it makes me mad. That's a more interesting presentation than just here's the top story and here's the next story.
I would appreciate if people simply say, this is the way I feel, this is my passion, this is my opinion, as opposed to this is the way everyone should feel. But let's just jump into it. What was your role? What was your role and initially, and where did it evolve to?
I mean, I started, at the bottom. I was a production assistant, and I was, the first thing they have you do is run scripts, which is literally going through the we called it the rundown, just a list of all the stories, going through there, hitting print, and then running the pages into the studio and putting them in front of the anchor. And
now that's boring.
That's boring and also useless because the anchor has the teleprompter in front of him. The paper scripts are just there in case the teleprompter goes down, which rarely happens on occasion, but it's very rare. So you're mostly just doing this duty as busy work. But that's I'm paying my dues. I'm fine with that. So that's what I started as, and then after a month or two of that, I moved on to doing videotape, which is a lot more interesting. You're going through video, you're selecting, the shots that look good and the sound bites that are interesting and that kind of thing. That's interesting work for a 22-year-old.
Plus, you have more power, more influence, and actually you're doing something. You're able to express who you are.
A frightening amount of influence because you are, in many cases, the last person to see the video before it goes on air to millions of people. There's not a lot of people. There's no people above you who will watch the video before you hand it to the playback person.
So in a sense, you were able to be in a position to slant based upon your preference and what you wanted the last person to see.
Absolutely. If I wanted to, make, say, President Bush look bad, I could select some video of him looking stupid and just put that in the VCR.
And Joe, did you do that? Come on, time of truth.
Oh, there were a few times I did, sure.
There we go.
I didn't make a habit of it. That was my subtle way of protesting, I guess.
So how is Fox structured? It's owned by Rupert Murdoch, sorry. But how is the power dispensed?
It is every show is its own autonomous unit. So there is, they do have a certain degree of leeway. They can carve their own path. But Roger Ailes, the company president, exerts control within that structure. So he'll let the show sort of go off on its own, but if they go too far off the reservation, he steps in, or more likely as one of his, lieutenants step in and say, hey, don't do that story anymore. You can't have that guest on, Roger doesn't like that guest, that kind of thing. So there is this sort of top-down control that, he will step in and exert his influence as he sees fit.
Now, you told the story that I found fascinating, that there was someone on the show that was liberal, but he was too convincing, too bright, and they didn't really want him there. What was that all about?
Yeah, there was a guest that O'Reilly really liked. He was a college professor, liberal guy, very liberal guy. More liberal than even I think some of his views are actually pretty far out there, but O'Reilly really liked him. He was a good guest. He was very intelligent and articulate and and a handsome guy. So perfect for television. O'Reilly loved him. Ailes hated him, and my theory was that it was because he was such an effective arguer, and. Eventually, Ailes put his foot down and said, you can't have this guy on anymore. And O'Reilly gave him some pushback. And eventually they struck a bargain. O'Reilly, you can have him once a month.
I see. So O'Reilly has a good deal of power.
He does, but it only goes so far. O'Reilly would prefer to have him once or twice a week, make him a regular guest.
It does sound, though, then that being the case, that O'Reilly is in fact wanting other people to hear the other side, and he's not trying to just have a singular agenda. Having this liberal come on and really liking him doesn't really show that he's afraid just for someone to espouse the other side of the coin.
He likes it when someone puts up a fight. He doesn't like, he's such a strong arguer. He doesn't like it when someone comes in and just gets kicked all around the room by him. So he does like it when, and he will put people with differing viewpoints on his show. Alan Colmes is a regular guest of his, I think, a couple times a week. So it's not just we can only have conservative guests on. O'Reilly will give a airing of the other side's viewpoint. And then ridicule it and,
Well, that's what he does, right? Yeah. So, Joe, is there really pressure to break the news first? What kind of pressure is there in the newsroom that most people don't really know about?
Well, it's very competitive, and we're always there are TVs all over the newsroom and all over the control rooms tuned into the other networks, to CNN, MSNBC, Headline News. And if there's a breaking news story, we want to be the first ones to break it, which is, I think, to 99% of viewers at home, they don't care. They're not like, oh, I watch Fox and I love Fox because they broke the story.
They broke the news first,
yeah,
right.
30 seconds before CNN broke it. But it's more like it's it's professional pride, I guess, on our parts that we wanted to break it first. And I think that's can be sort of a dangerous impulse because it leads to you oftentimes going off sort of half-cocked and putting out wrong information.
Right. Well, if you don't have all the information, you want to break it first, then you don't have everything at your feet. I think people should listen to GluckRadio to break the news first because I will predict the news. Okay. Now, you describe the environment in the newsroom as a frat house. What is the environment in the newsroom?
It is very. It was funny. It struck me, right off the bat how wild it is. It gets very, it can be a high stress situation. If there's breaking news coming in, if you're constantly under deadlines, there's a lot of pressure, and people will blow off steam by there's a lot of profane language being tossed around. There's a lot of making fun of people behind the scenes. Like you make fun of your anchor up on the TV screen in the control room. You're making fun of your guests, that kind of thing. So there. And there's a lot of stuff that probably.
And are you allowed to do that? Do you get away with it? Meaning, is it tolerable? People will just kind of allow you to. Okay, good, excellent.
It's like a rite of passage. It's like you're not, It's kind of cool to sort of not care about anything, to sort of strike that I'm above it all attitude and just ridicule everything you see in front of you. That's the cool kids do that.
Get onto the juice here. About 6 months after, you said that you were subject to an inquisition about your beliefs. And I like the word inquisition. What did they actually do? Did they tie you to a stake? How did they get your beliefs? And why did they even care? Weren't you doing your job?
Well, this was the meeting. We called it the Kool-Aid Conference, as in, have you drank the Fox News Kool-Aid yet? And this was sort of their screening process to see if you could move on from freelance to staff. When I started, I was freelance.
So this is to join the organization.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And everyone talked about this. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, you got this meeting coming up, which means, good thing because it means they like you and they want to keep you. But the bad thing is they're going to grill you a little bit on whether or not you share these beliefs. And, you have to, if you don't share the beliefs, then you have to basically lie to keep your job.
So what did they ask you and what did you tell them?
Well, like I said before, it's a lot of coded language, because they can't actually ask you, it's illegal to actually ask you what you believe, but they'll say stuff like, so what do you think about, us being fair and balanced? That's the Fox News motto, fair and balanced. What do you think about us being fair and balanced? Do you agree with that? Do you think that we are fair and balanced? And you sort of squirm and you're like, because nobody.
So how did you answer that?
Well, no. It's funny. I found out early on that nobody there actually believes in that motto. Even the conservative producers are kind of like, "Oh yeah, that's all BS. That's nonsense." I answered it by very carefully. I chose my words carefully, and I said something along the lines of, I believe that our straight news coverage is very fair and down the middle, and then we have a lot of conservative commentators, and our critics don't, watch the network enough to realize that our commentators are separate from our news gatherers. That's a careful answer, and probably
that was a good one,
a good answer,
and actually a fairly accurate one.
Well, see, I don't actually believe that. I think there is a slant that they do put on the straight news. The shows that they say, quote unquote, are straight news. There is that slant that runs throughout the network.
Do you believe that is different than, let's say, the New York Times, which is perceived to be left? I see it as left. Or any other news media organization is owned by someone, and that someone has an opinion, and that someone is trying to get their opinion out. Are there people out in the news world that have opinions but yet will report the news completely objectively? Does that even exist?
I don't think there's such a thing as true objectivity, no.
And I agree.
I think everyone brings, whether it's unconscious or not, brings their own biases and beliefs into their job.
So were you the only liberal spy there, or were there other liberals who kind of hung out and you had like a little liberal party? And
I was the only one dumb enough to open my mouth about it, I guess.
Well, we don't know if it's dumb or smart. We have to see how many books you sell.
We'll see.
If you make millions, it was smart, and if you don't, it was dumb.
I could turn out to be a genius. We'll see.
Exactly. No, it appears, at least we're made to believe that in prior generations that the news was more, some of the older newscasters who no longer live, that they were more down the middle. Today, this is what the news was, but it's really hard to say.
Well, and a lot of those old newscasters were revealed later to be sort of, raging lefties. Like, I think what's his face, Cronkite, in his old age, came out as sort of a pretty liberal guy, and we do have this fantasy of sort of the objective newsman, and I agree with you that doesn't really exist.
So, what's the difference? What's your definition of the difference between a liberal and a conservative? And is there such a thing? Meaning, I am fiscally extremely conservative. I'm probably socially liberal, but I'm probably more libertarian in terms of, I don't particularly like big government or people in my business. So what would be your definition of liberal or conservative?
My definition of liberal or conservative?
Yeah. Like, what's a liberal, what's a conservative? That's a question.
That is a question. I mean...
and then I appreciate your pause, because if I asked you right away, are you a liberal? You would say what?
I would say yes.
Yes. So you said that quickly, but when I asked you what the difference is, you paused.
Well, I mean, the dictionary definition...
I don't want a dictionary. I'm not talking to a dictionary. I'm talking to Joe.
A liberal would be a person who believes in who takes the left on certain positions, and the conservative would be a person who takes the leans to the right on certain positions.
So what's the left and what's the right? What does that mean?
Well, you can stake a place on any given issue.
Yes, but you said left or right. What does that actually translate into? What is the left? What is the right?
Which issue are you talking about? I mean, I think there's a
now,
position.
I'm talking about a position, meaning when we talk about a slant, about a person being liberal, are we saying that they are trying to do what? They're trying to take what spin and for what purpose, whether it's left or right?
It's hard to define those things without delving into even more words that need more definition.
You know what, Joe? That's my point. Everyone defines themselves as a liberal or conservative, but they don't have a clue exactly what that means. I find that basically what people do is they look at things based upon their own self-interest, whatever that means. If they have, for whatever reason, they grew up homophobic because their parents weren't bright enough to teach them that all human beings are inherently special and unique, and that is a really wonderful thing, they may turn out to be conservative because they got this prejudicial teaching early on. Are they conservative or are they liberal? In my mind, they're just brainwashed based upon who influenced them.
I mean, labels are, labeling anyone's something as complex and varied as political beliefs is dangerous. I mean, like you said, you're fiscally conservative, you're socially liberal. Well, what do we call you? I mean, what do we call you? There's really no word for what you are.
Right,
are you a libertarian? You could be a libertarian, right?
But I said, meaning what I am is you ask me a specific topic and I'll tell you what it is. Right. But I would change on one topic or the other. I could never be a part of a group that has a label on it, which is why I wouldn't fit into any organized. I wouldn't join any organization who would have me, because I hold whatever belief I hold for the reasons that I see to be fit and just.
I use liberal as a shorthand for what I am, but there are even a few issues that I'm relatively conservative on, I would say.
Okay. So in some areas you could be conservative as well.
Right.
So when did you come out of the closet?
I think it was I kept my mouth shut for years and years and years, because I was paranoid, because there were even rumors that there were listening devices installed in the newsroom in the ceilings that they would listen for people saying liberal things or talking bad about ales,
But was that true? That was just but it doesn't matter.
I doubt it was true, but it just shows you how paranoid a place it was that we would even entertain the thought. Okay. I was only half sure that it was a fake rumor. But during the 2008 election, I'd been on O'Reilly's staff for a while at that point, and I felt sort of secure enough to and I felt secure enough to sort of creep out of the closet, as it were, and root a little bit for the home team for Obama. I was actually a Hillary fan at first, for lack of having a stronger candidate. I didn't think Obama had a chance, and then once I sort of got to know him and realized that he had a chance, I went Team Obama all the way.
When you say got to know him through whatever policies or politics that came across.
Right. Once I took a look at his positions and whatnot.
So at that point, you started to express that?
Yeah, and it was subtle at first. It was, because you didn't want to root openly in front of O'Reilly, especially, he wasn't. I forget who he was for at first. I don't think he was for McCain at first. Who else even ran against McCain in that primary?
Oh, there was a bunch of guys.
I can't even remember now, though. I guess Mitt Romney and Huckabee ran against him that year. But, there were little ways you could sort of, support your guy. Just by, even if something as subtle as like, someone says something anti-Obama at the pitch meeting and you roll your eyes, I think that was the first, when I first started to come out and people sort of picked up on where I was.
Right, so they read your body language and that's pretty easy to do.
Right.
Okay. And was that frowned on? Were you approached and said, you rolled your eyes? What's the deal with that?
No, I mean, O'Reilly's staff was small and close knit, and it wasn't, his staff is not like raging conservatives. There are a few on the staff, but the rest of them are just sort of middle of the road or don't care either way.
What is Bill like personally? I mean, is his personal off-air personality very similar to his on-air personality? Did you get to know him?
He is a lot. Oh yeah, I mean, very small staff. There are only about 15 of us, and my desk was about 10 feet from his office, so you get to know him pretty well. He's actually, oddly enough, almost shy in person. He's quiet. He's not very gregarious. On TV he's very outgoing. He's very animated.
But that's actually very common. I mean, I do executive life coaching. That's really common. People who, in their professional persona, seem as if they rule the world, and in their personal persona, they're very internal. They're always in their head.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So that's so he was pretty shy. What else?
That's him.
Was he friendly?
No, I would not
friendly.
Classify him as friendly. He was very. My biggest problem with him was he was very quick to anger. That was always his first impulse to go somewhere, to the point where his staff was afraid to tell him bad news. We were afraid to, because he heard the bad news and that's it. He shut off. He wouldn't hear, oh, but it's okay because we're fixing it. He would just hear, this is bad news. I don't want to hear this. Heads will roll, Like he could not take, and when you're producing a TV show, an hour-long TV show, there's always going to be little bumps and hitches in the road.
Always, and some big bumps.
Yeah. Guest can't make it. Satellite goes down. We didn't get the piece of video we wanted. So there's a million little problems a day. But we were afraid to tell him when anything went wrong because you never knew how he was going to react. Sometimes you just go, oh, okay, find another guest. Other times he would scream and rage and call us incompetent and I'll get someone in here who can actually run the show if you can't handle this, So his unpredictability made us afraid to sort of, be honest with him, and it made our jobs a lot harder and our lives a lot more,
See, that, by the way, is my observation. When a person's online and offline personality differentiate, then that's where you get the anger, because anger is about a sense of injustice, but it's also about a little bit about an identity disorder. So because he was a bit skewed, because angry people who are the same on and off tend to be angry less, because except there's real incompetence. If there's real incompetence, he's got a show to run, and you're right to be pissed off. But that's kind of interesting. Is everyone at Fox a conservative, or they're just doing their job? Do you find that there really are more conservatives than non-conservatives, or just kids looking for jobs and they run up the ranks?
Well, that was how I got in there. I was sort of just a kid looking for a job, and then sort of stumbled my way up the ranks. That's Fox. is, from what I know of other news organizations and newsrooms, Fox is astonishingly conservative compared to those. But maybe, as you said before, that's because the other newsrooms are, almost across the board liberal. So, if you're a conservative journalist, you're obviously.
And why is that? Why
Fox.
and I do find that, why are all the other TV shows, why are they perceived to be much more liberal? And I find them to be more liberal. And by liberal, I mean that they have an agenda. Meaning conservative, I also feel, has an agenda, as opposed to there's no agenda. This is what's happening.
I think the journalism profession as a whole is liberal because it is a self-selecting group. If I think, when I was in college, all the people who were journalism majors were by and large liberal.
Okay.
I just think that the liberal brain is more attracted to that as a profession than the conservative brain, if that makes any sense.
I actually completely agree with you. Okay, and I think it makes sense because I find that what children try to do at one point is, as they try to grow past their parents, they are perceived as more liberal because they're trying to find their own identity. So when you're young and you're out of the sphere of that which molded you, and now you're trying to actually become your own person, you are going to challenge beliefs. So I think that makes total sense to me. And at some time, there used to be an expression: the difference between a liberal and a conservative is just one good mugging. And I find that even with people of faith, the difference between someone who has great faith is something tragically happens to them, and now their faith is, I don't have faith anymore. I'm an atheist. Why am I an atheist? Because I had this happen to me, and I didn't deserve it. And if there was a God, it wouldn't happen.
And beliefs can. I think beliefs can change, very easily based on, who your friends are, who your peers are, where you live, and that's another reason journalism is so liberal. It's based in New York City, the East Coast capital of godless liberalism, and there is all this. I think peer pressure if you come here as a conservative at age 22, and you're looking for like-minded people, you're going to have a hard time finding them in New York City. So a lot of people I started with, they were fresh out of college, they were conservative, I know are now, bleeding liberals, oddly as it sounded, because, 8 years of living in New York City will do that to you sometimes, oddly enough.
So if you want to actually be more conservative, go to Kansas, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
So who actually is watching Fox News? Do they actually have a following? Are they people who simply want to hear what they want to hear and not necessarily a down the middle objectivity?
I think so. I mean, Fox's audience is older than most older than the competitors, at least. In fact, Fox's audience is so old that Nielsen can't even measure it. Nielsen cuts off the average. They'll give you the average age of the viewer. They cut it off at 65. Fox is the only news network that the average age of the viewer is over 65, as in so old Nielsen can't even record it. So that's one thing, and I don't know. Read into that what you will. I would say in general, obviously, younger people are more liberal, older people are more conservative.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a demographic thing. But the Fox viewer, I think, judging from my contact with them,
unless you see the conservative as the new liberal, because the conservative obviously is breaking away from the pact of the liberal thought, and now they're liberal because they see things differently.
Oh, yeah, and libertarianism is sort of the new hotness. I think they're going to be the new hip, demographic group in the coming years.
I completely agree.
But judging from my contact with the viewers and listeners, when I was on O'Reilly's radio show and I did call screening, so I got a lot of FaceTime, so to speak, with the listeners then. I would say they do strongly believe that Fox is the only one out there telling the truth, that the other networks are either liberal or in Obama's pocket or just outright lying, and that Fox is the only network that gives it to them straight. That's what they believe. They don't. A lot of them do not perceive Fox as this is conservative news. They view it as this is this is the news. This is the only news. Everyone else is super far to the left.
It does seem that, and I'm curious about this, that Obama right now is in a bit of trouble because he's been flip-flopping a little bit, and his ratings, he's beginning to look like George Bush in the second half of his term. Does Fox take joy when they see that the president is actually going through a struggle, or are they sympathetic?
Oh, well, they're definitely not sympathetic. I think many people at the network take joy, in seeing the president stumble. And that's fine. I mean, there's a lot of, anchors, who are open about their beliefs. Sean Hannity, for one, has said from day one, I want this president to fail. He's said that in so many words.
So tell me, have you met Sean Hannity, and who's the other very conservative? Rush. What's their relationship to Fox, Rush and Hannity?
Well, Hannity still works for Fox.
Okay.
Although he just got demoted, sort of. He's losing his 9 o'clock slot to Megyn Kelly, who's sort of a young, up and comer. Limbaugh is very friendly with Ailes. They're tight. I'm shocked the idea of giving Limbaugh a TV show on Fox has never come up. But I guarantee you it has come up at some point. But he makes so much money from his radio show. Why would he even dabble with television?
Because once you make so much money, then you dabble with your personality.
Yeah.
At one point, you make money, then you do what you want to do, not what you have to do.
Yeah, but Hannity, it's odd that Fox is almost trying to downplay him now. He is, he's probably the most strident voice for conservatism on Fox. He's the most openly partisan, I think, to the point where it's almost dishonest. He's I think misleading his audience to a point. Contrast that to O'Reilly, who I think is obviously conservative, but he's not disingenuous. He will not say something he knows to be untrue. He takes great pride in informing his audience, and letting them, as he says, decide for themselves.
At what point does someone like Rush or Hannity become simply actors in a play which they already have a role that is given to them, or they created for themselves, and they have to perpetuate it, as opposed to actually being in the news business?
Well, I would say neither one of them are actually in the news business. I think they're fully, moved on to being commentators. They're not. Okay. They wouldn't consider themselves reporters in any capacity. And that's fine. And obviously, and there is, there's demand for what they do. I don't know how many listeners Limbaugh has, but there's a reason they're paying him.
A huge amount of listeners. People like when other people express their feelings, because number one, how many people could publicly speak or get on TV or radio and say what they feel? So if you say what they feel, they're going to turn and listen to you. There wouldn't be a Hannity or a Limbaugh if there wasn't an audience for it. Right, the same way, for Howard Stern. Like him and don't like him. Why is he very popular? Because people like what he has to say. Right.
And they're both very talented at what they do. Like, I don't want to, I don't agree with them politically, but I have respect for them for their skills, because it's hard to get on a microphone and talk for 3 hours a day, or go on TV and present yourself, and not stumble over your words for an hour every day. That's hard to do, and it's hard to do that and to stay on top for years and years and years, as these people have.
You know what you're saying is just so important, because everyone likes to be the backseat commentator. Whether or not you're looking at someone who's in public office. So many people have no respect for politicians. But it is very, very difficult when you represent a huge amount of people and everyone has diverse interests to be able to balance that out and not find yourself in a position where you don't even know what you're doing every single day. Now, Bill is a Roman Catholic, correct? It's a staunch Roman Catholic conservative.
Yes.
So in your book, he says something in a joking manner, and he says he should have been gay. What was that all about?
That's one of my favorite O'Reilly moments of all time. It was. I'll tell the whole story for the benefit of
Absolutely.
He has a thriving side business selling merchandise on his website, and it's all sort of O'Reilly branded stuff. You know, golf balls, T-shirts, doormats. Doormats are a huge seller for them. Doormats that say like an American patriot lives here or something like that. It's very odd the stuff people will buy, but he designed a T-shirt that he was very proud of, or was it a polo shirt? Maybe it was a polo shirt. I think it was a polo shirt that said O'Reilly Factor Staff, and he unveiled it at one of our weekly pitch meetings, and he was very proud of it, and he was just like, "Yep, I designed this shirt myself. It's going to be a #1 seller. I designed it myself. Probably should have been a gay guy." It was such an offhand remark, and he'd never said anything like it before, and I think he realized right away that it was something weird to say.
Well, actually, what he's implying is that gay guys have more artistic, creative ability than straight guys, and they're more prone to go into graphic arts.
Right. It wasn't necessarily. It wasn't.
He let his guard down.
Right, and it wasn't a hateful thing to say. It wasn't like I should have.
No. It didn't sound like that.
It was a stereotypical thing to say, but it was it was just so so funny for him to let his guard down and say something like that, because he is a very guarded individual.
It's like a carpenter who can't do well as a carpenter, but he's a good arguer. He says, "I should have been a Jew." He's a Jewish lawyer. That's it.
Right, exactly. It was. I mean, it was one of my favorite moments. And with the staff, we didn't know how to react, because normally, he makes a joke, and we all, sycophantically will laugh at the joke. But we were like, we kind of looked around uncomfortably, because we're like, was that a joke? Was he kidding? Was he? And he's like, he was uncomfortable, I think, having said something like that.
So, John, I'm going to turn to GluckRadio page 6. There was the purported sex scandal with Bill. What was that all about?
Well, I was not working on his show at the time, but I was at Fox, and that was that was like a nuclear bomb went off in the newsroom. It was just, consumed everyone's attention for, it was very brief. It was 2 weeks, but the gist of the story is one of his staffers, an associate producer, which is actually the title I ended up having, oddly enough, accused him of sexual harassment, said that he, in a series of phone calls and dinner conversations, was sort of pressuring her for sex and saying inappropriate things, and even on a couple occasions called her and tried to get her to engage in phone sex. And the reason we knew all this is because they filed a lawsuit and then leaked the transcript leaked the text of the lawsuit to the Smoking Gun website. And the lawsuit had very long, detailed transcripts of some of these phone conversations, which apparently she had been recording him.
And she wasn't in it for the money.
She asked for $40 million, $60 million, something.
Anyone listening, you could sexually harass me for $40 million. Yeah. It doesn't, you can say anything you want to. And
that's what I said when I took the O'Reilly job. One of my friends at the office was like, "Well, what are you going to do if he sexually harasses you?" And I was like, for the kind of money she got, I'd let him. I'll let him talk dirty to me all he wants. But they eventually it was ugly. It was a scary time at Fox, and they eventually settled for an undisclosed amount of money. There are rumors it was somewhere around the range of $4 to $10 million, something like that.
$4 to $10 million.
Yeah.
$4 to $10 million.
Yeah. But I could see him doing something like that, not out of any sense of maliciousness, but just because he's kind of obtuse and probably did not realize that, he probably assumed wrongly, obviously, assumed that she wanted it, I guess. That sounds like victim blaming.
You know what? Everyone's wound up tight, and everyone has a little bit of a dark side to them. Everyone does, and it comes out. And for the most part, because there's such a an image that people have, that anything that distorts the image makes people like insane. Like I read a book on Mother Teresa where the writer of the book was saying, how she would rant and rage and wasn't really nice and friendly and so on and so forth. But, we don't hear a lot about that. It seems the church seemed to kind of quiet that down because we want to kind of keep the image. So, but $4 to $10 million for some, inappropriate talk.
Yeah, well.
What is this world coming to? Too many lawyers. I want to talk more about what made you write the book.
Well, I mean, after I was, asked to leave, as I say, from Fox.
It's a euphemism for fired. And
yes.
what was the cause for firing?
Well, I mean, anonymously leaking to GluckRadio.com.
Okay.
was the cause. I don't know what they, the official language put it, but that was what happened.
And what made you make the decision to leak to GluckRadio.com?
Well, it wasn't a very well thought out plan. Let me say right off the bat there. It was, not the sharpest thing I've ever done. I was trying to get a job with Gawker. Actually, that was my end game. That was my ultimate end game. Was I'll give them some funny tidbits, write some funny columns, and then when I leave Fox, they'll hire me.
How'd that work out?
Yeah, it blew up in my face almost immediately. Is how it worked out. I think it lasted about 36 hours. And I never leaked to Gawker to be malicious or to be hateful or anything like that. And I think the book reflects that as well. That it's not, I'm not a bad guy out to hurt Fox. I just want to kind of tell an entertaining story about this, which I think is a very interesting workplace. And I'm sort of backing into answering your question from before. That's why I wrote this book, because I thought I had an entertaining story to tell. I think Fox is a fascinating place that you don't hear a lot of information from inside leak out into the world. So I wanted to give a snapshot of what it's like to work at this place, and especially what it's like to work there as someone who doesn't, who's not a believer, who's not a true believer in their, in their ideology.
Right. So it just sounds like you just simply wanted to express yourself, and you didn't know what you were getting yourself completely into, and it just kind of boomed.
Absolutely, yes. I think it's fair to say I did not know what I was getting myself into, and it was. I don't know why I had it in my head that it would be like this carefree lark, and I'd never get caught, and there'd be no consequences, and I don't know what possessed me to think that
you just answered the question. You weren't thinking; you were feeling. Okay, if you didn't think it through, you felt it through.
Right,
which is what happens with most people. To be honest with you, when most people they live their life through the immensity and intensity of their feelings and not necessarily process it out. But your openness and honesty about it is so incredibly refreshing. Glenn Beck, what do you think of this guy? He rode the wave of the Tea Party, and tell me how Fox sees Glenn Beck and how you see him.
He is both insane and a genius. I think it's possible to be both at the same time.
I think you have to be, actually.
Right. He was such a phenomenon, but he burned so bright and so quickly. He just he just flamed out almost immediately. But when he came to the network, he was pulling ratings numbers like no one had ever seen. He was getting numbers at 5 o'clock that rivaled O'Reilly's at 8 p.m., which was shocking. I mean, that was shocking to have someone come in and upset the pecking order so much like that. And he was sort of a right place, right time guy. He started at Fox, I think, the day before Obama was inaugurated, and he just caught that, wave of our viewers just hated Obama off the bat, and he was there to sort of catch and channel all of that rage into this very briefly successful TV show.
What made it blow up? Why did people lose interest in his commentary?
He went too far off the rails. Once, you can only sustain this sort of Tea Party anger that he stoked. You can only sustain it for so long. And eventually that initial wave of anger petered out, and he moved on to other topics that people weren't as interested in. I think before he left, he was really hot on like this weird conspiracy theory about how the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt is somehow tied with American liberal groups, and it sounded kooky. Even if you were inclined to agree with him, it just sounded kooky, and people, I think, lost interest in his show, and he lost the faith of the bosses. Roger Ailes was like, I'm no longer convinced that you're good for this network. Basically.
Well, he simply went too far.
Right.
Interesting.
And he couldn't be reined in. Is what happened. Is Ailes said, hey,
pull it in. He wouldn't pull it in.
Knock it off. And Beck said, no, I'm on a crusade here. I can't. And Ailes said, well, not in my network.
So tell me your take on Sarah Palin.
She's another one who burned brightly and quickly, isn't she? She should have been a perfect match for Fox. Should have been. She's spunky. She's conservative. She gives a good punchy soundbite. Her problem was she was just as intellectually uncurious as every liberal accused her of being. She never did her homework, and it's not the hardest job in the world to go on TV and talk for 5 minutes in a segment. It's not the hardest thing in the world, but you need to do a certain ground level of preparation, and she refused to do even that, and it showed on air. And she would give these very vacuous performances where she would say nothing of substance, and eventually the audience lost interest in her.
Now, you wrote in your book something, I have a note here, that does Fox only hire very beautiful women? Is there a prejudicial or preference that Fox does in their hiring of women who are attractive or not attractive, or is that just the whole news business or TV business?
That's television and news in general is always going to be more inclined towards the attractive faces.
So you mean even the liberal stations will hire more attractive people?
They will, but I think Fox takes it to sort of an absurd extreme.
Explain. Because I didn't see any Playboy bunnies at Fox, but get.
Oh no! Oh, I disagree. I think the women there are absolutely gorgeous. It's amazing walking around the halls there and seeing these statuesque blonde women with their big poofy hairdos that they get made up for air. Fox takes it to more absurd extremes than the other networks, to the point where they will barely even allow an unattractive woman to work there. And there were a few, when I started, there were a few older female anchors who were sort of stuck on the overnight shift, where I was for a few months. And they eventually fired even them and hired younger, better looking people. So,
and no lawsuits about that.
No, because you are actually allowed to do that for TV news, because you can supposedly that's what I was told at one point, is that you can make the argument that since you're putting your product, arguably has to look as good as possible, you can hire the person you think is the best looking, So it's not, Fox would say, oh, it's not age discrimination, it's beauty discrimination, which is perfectly allowed. I guess
at the end of the day, every business is trying to sell their product, and their product is news. So whatever they need to do to sell their product, then I guess they're allowed to do within the law.
Funny story about that. When after O'Reilly's little dust up, we all had to take sexual harassment, awareness classes, right? Right. And one of the anchors was in one of my classes, and she said it was like a Q&A session with these two lawyers running the class. And she said, theoretically, let's say one of my bosses said, I'm not allowed to wear pants on air. I have to wear a skirt all the time because the audience likes looking at my legs. She said, let's say I'm not saying anyone said that to me, but theoretically, if someone said that to me, is that harassment? And the lawyer's like, actually, it's not, because for the reason I just laid out earlier, is that's Fox's on-air product. And if they say, you have to do the news in a bikini, then you have to do the news in a bikini. That's not harassment. That's just them making their best product on air.
Hence why Hooters has the uniform that they have.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we know at the end of the day it's all about the audience. If you were running your own news station, who would you hire? Would you hire just liberals? Would you hire conservatives? Or would you hire libertarians? Or would you hire the people, or a mix of them? What would you do?
I would hire a mix. I think a network that only has one viewpoint is boring. I would definitely I'd want far right people. I'd want far left people. I'd want people in the middle, and I'd put them all in a room and say, hash it out, because I think that's what makes for the best, the best TV is a multitude of viewpoints sort of competing for supremacy. So I wouldn't limit it to any one, ideological group.
And I completely agree. I think that the problem that people have is they don't listen. That in most people's communication, they're playing tennis, not catch. They don't try to understand. They want to be understood, but they have no clue in trying to understand what the other person's saying. What's next for you? I'm more interested for you. Where do you go from here? Are you employable in the news business? I mean, did you burn your bridges or?
Not in the news business.
No.
And that's the feeling is mutual there. They don't want me back, and I don't want to go back to them. The news after a while has just become such a grind that, when I approached Gawker, I knew that my career in news was over already. And that
So what's next, Joe?
Well, I'm working on book number 2.
Excellent.
Won't be about Fox. It won't,
It's going to be about GluckRadio, right?
Yeah, and I have picked up a lot of insider information in the hour I've been here. So we'll see. We'll see if you make an appearance in the next book. Working on book number 2, and I am still doing stuff in television. So it's, news is out, but TV I'm still good in. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah. Enjoy the hour with you, your candor, your openness, and the fact that you just simply say it from the heart and you're not really trying to position yourself in any one way was incredibly refreshing. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Great. Joe Muto was our guest today, and quite a great guest. I'd like to thank him once more for joining us on Gluck Radio. Pick up a copy of his book, An Atheist in the Foxhole. It's on Amazon. Be sure to check out his website, joemuto.com. I am Dr. Errol Gluck. Remember, to every problem, there is a solution. Please check out our other episodes on GluckRadio.com. Email me with your feedback. We're actually having a contest now. Email me for what is your favorite show and why. Next week, we're going to have Betsy come in and co-host a show with me. Now we're going to be talking to Omar Nijwala about cravings and the science behind them. Thanks as always for tuning in. Till next time.